Okay, so this is where we are today, the third session. It's March 20th. So just as a reminder, we've talked about understanding the needs of opportunity youth. We've talked about what makes a good workforce development program. And today we're going to hear from some experts who have implemented and or evaluated direct cash payments for youth. And again, this roadblock was designed specifically so that for our next session, you will have all the building blocks you need to be able to make a really informed decision when it comes to funding a youth-focused workforce development program that will have a GI component. So I'm really excited about this session today. I think I might have mentioned this before, but I just wanted to say, there are a lot of guaranteed income pilots and programs happening across the nation, but most of them don't focus on youth. And the ones that do almost always focus on a very specific cohort, usually youth who are aging out of foster care or youth who are themselves parents. So last year when I was setting this up and doing a lot of research, I spread my net far and wide to try and find folks who were working on programs with general population of youth, because that's going to be most salient for us. So we can go to the next slide. I am very excited about the speakers we have lined up for you today. I think we're going to get a lot of useful information. And so I'll let you just take a quick look here. We have Talia from the Rooted School Foundation. We have John from Metro United Way, and we have Drs. Littman and Lightfoot who work together out in California to research GI programs. So I will stop talking and I will hand it over to Talia.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share about a program that I think we're even moving beyond pilot stage at this point, that has been going on since 2020. So my name is Talia Livnay. I'm the Senior Director of Programs for Rooted School Foundation. And today I'm going to share about the $50 study, which is a direct cash transfer program for high school students. Before I dive into the $50 study, I do want to share a little bit more about Rooted School Foundation, or RSF, I might refer to it as that. We are a nonprofit organization that encompasses several public charter schools and youth programs. We aim to test place-based strategies within our schools and then scale those so that more students can experience accelerated upward economic and social mobility. We have 4 schools around the country right now. So my background is actually in education, and I started as a math teacher at our first school here in New Orleans. We also have a school in Indianapolis, in Vancouver, Washington, and we're opening our 4th campus in Las Vegas this fall. So the primary work that we do is education, and the $50 study came from some needs that we were seeing from students that I'll get into in just a moment. At our school level, we provide a curriculum that prepares students for college and career with the mission to reimagine the role that schools play in providing students with personal pathways to financial freedom. So here's a photo of some of our students. This was our second graduating class in 2022. These students were, right in the middle of their high school experience when the COVID pandemic started. And what we noticed is that students stopped coming to school, even virtual school. And New Orleans, as many of you probably know, is a tourism-based city. And so when traveling stopped at the start of the pandemic, a number of our families were impacted in a variety of ways. And so when we were asking our students, like, why are you not coming to school? We were hearing loud and clear that their family needed them to work or needed them to provide childcare because parents couldn't provide all of that on their own. At the same time, we were in conversations with a funding organization about what a guaranteed income pilot could look like. And so the need that was being expressed by our students combined with some initial seed funding allowed us to start the $50 study. And so, like I said, it's a direct cash transfer program. We give students $50 a week for 40 weeks, which is about the duration of a school year. It sums to $2,000 total, and they're free to spend the money as they see fit. We put no conditions on how they spend it, and we put no conditions on receiving it. In 2020, like I said, we started that micro pilot with 20 12th grade students. The findings were successful enough, of course, quite a small sample size, that from 2022 to 2024, we were able to engage in a multi-phase randomized controlled trial with students from our schools in New Orleans and Indianapolis. We had a total of 173 students who received the cash transfer over those 2 years. We had additional students in the control group, and so we were able to compare outcomes between the two. And this year, we are engaging in a study alongside the mayor's office in the city of New Orleans to give about 250 high school seniors the direct cash transfers. And so the purpose of this phase that we're in now, phase 3, is to add a longitudinal component to the study so that we can look at not just the short-term and near-term impacts, but long-term impacts as well. I'm happy to talk more about the research design and all that good stuff. But I don't think that's the purpose of today, so I'm going to move us forward quickly. I will share what our research questions and objectives are because I do think that they point to some of the things that we've learned along the way. So we wanted to see if cash transfers impacted school attendance and truancy. The COVID pandemic really just created almost a crisis, I'd say, amongst all schools across all grades with students just not attending as much. We wanted to see if it impacted school achievement, if it impacted college readiness as measured by ACT, any other post-secondary engagement or enrollment, and financial capability and literacy. And so what we found during phase 1 of our RCT is that there were some really directionally promising results. GPA increased more for the students who received the cash transfers. There is more credit attainment for students who received the cash transfers. Lexile growth increased at a higher rate. That's reading level, which is, of course, directly connected to success in post-secondary settings, as well as careers, etc. And then the point that I'm most excited about is that we saw a decrease in days absent for students who received the cash transfers. And as a reminder, the cash transfers were not conditional. So these were impacts that we were seeing by virtue of having access to the additional resources. We also found it really important to look at how students were spending their money, both from a research standpoint and to disrupt a lot of harmful narratives that we know exist around giving money to young people and especially giving money to young people of color. And so what we found is that students were spending about 50% of the money that we transferred to them. So if you look at that first pie chart up in the top left corner, the green represents point of sale purchases, so that's at stores. The pie chart on the bottom shares more about how they spent that. And so food and groceries made up a big component or a big piece of the pie. Retail sales and services and transportation coming in second and third. What I found really exciting and really interesting is that 46% of the money that was transferred to students was remaining in accounts at the end of the study. This is something that we see a lot in not just pilots with youth, of which there are not many, to Rachel's point, but also with adults, is that there's some initial spending that happens when the transfers start during the first few months, as folks are getting, or building their trust with the program, or maybe stabilizing some financial situations. And then as they start to trust that the money is going to continue to come, bills have been paid, there can be some forward thinking and savings that goes along with any goals that they might have or future endeavors. $2,000 is not a lot of money. $1,000 in savings is not a lot of money. But we know that it builds some habits of around spending, and this is the financial capability and literacy that we talk about. Students shared that they were also able to take advantage of more opportunities because of the weekly transfers. And so we label this in our program as increased agency and opportunity. So they don't necessarily have to ask their parents for money to participate in extracurriculars, whether that be sports teams, tutoring, getting a job and now having the means to get themselves to and from that job. They also noticed an impact on their social life. Some of my favorite anecdotes from students are the joy that they express when they're able to buy their friends pizza or go to the movies with their friends. And I think often we think about guaranteed income as mitigating really, really acute needs around maybe hunger or keeping bills on. But I think what often gets missed in the conversation is access to joy and being able to participate in our relationships and in our communities in a different way. Um, I included a quote from a student in Indianapolis who shared that they were able to buy sports equipment with the extra $50 a week, and fund a college field trip to Cincinnati State and Ohio State. And so the ripple effects, we don't necessarily know what those are. I don't know where this young man ended up in school, but I do know that he had access to more opportunities because of the resources. I want to close with, and this will be the end of my presentation, barring any questions, with a student, Peyton from New Orleans, sharing about the $50 study in her own words. So I'm going to fingers crossed that the volume works, and I'll let her take it away.
When I first heard about it, they were like, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna give you guys $50 a week," and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm about to be rich! Like y'all gonna pay my gas money? I don't even drive." I've been wanting a job for a while, and then my like made me realize I don't have time for a job. I take 3 dual enrollment courses, plus high school, plus my extracurriculars, ACT classes twice a week until 8 p.m. And I was like, this could be a cool chance to have some sort of influx of money that is mine. Like, it's not my mom's. No one else has control over it except for me. Like, we're high schoolers. Any like source of money can be beneficial to us, buying things we want, but also like help our families out and us out in any way.
And that clip comes from a podcast that we have. We invite students who participate in the program to also participate in recording podcast episodes so that they can share their experiences in their own words.
When I first heard about it, they were like,
I think I have one more slide here. So to listen, and I can share this link with Rachel, who I'm sure can share it later. If you want to listen to the podcast, it's on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Music. We're recording our third season right now, which is very exciting. And then I put my contact information here in the event anyone wants to connect. That first email address is my personal one. Second one is the one for the study. I know I didn't have time to get into like mechanisms of disbursement and how we scale it and other programmatic elements, but always, always happy to talk about that. And I think that's it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Talia. I know I didn't put forward an agenda, so apologies for that, but we will take, as we have done before, we can take a few minutes if people have any specific questions for Talia before we move on to John. And then after all the speakers, we'll again have more time for question and answers. So if anyone has any, please go ahead.
So I get the benefits that students felt, but it seemed like the statistics for attending school were pretty large, and I'm wondering what you attribute that connection to. So if I'm getting money, supplemental income, I don't necessarily equate that in my head to attending school more. So can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. I appreciate that question, Peter. And I think it's a very nuanced challenge, school attendance and truancy. And then, the solutions are also quite complex as well. But I can share what we've heard from students anecdotally. I think the first is that students with additional resources also have additional access to how they get to school. So if you don't have money, right, you're limited to the methods that either your parent provides or the school provides, which is oftentimes sitting on a school bus for multiple hours. If your parent has to go to work early, come home late, right, you're at the whim of other people. And so we hear stories of students using the cash transfers to pay for Ubers, to buy their own bus fare, and to choose the mechanism by which they get to school. The other is that with the additional $50 a week, and I'll kind of zoom in on Louisiana, right now our minimum wage is $7.25. So this equates to, I know, this equates to, about a student working 7 to 8 hours a week, which is like often what we see students doing in a part-time job. If they no longer feel the need to have that part-time job, right, they're probably going to bed earlier, they're not missing school to go to work. And so one of the things that I find most fascinating about this program is like connecting the dots. And it's really opened my eyes to all the different ways that, limited financial resources impacts the day to day for students. but also how a small amount of money can drastically change circumstance. So if a student doesn't need to work anymore, they can start prioritizing school. And this is where like the qualitative data collection, I think, just adds so many layers to our understanding of impact.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Talia. I do see one question from Bill.
Yes.
So he's interested about how you chose the schools and if there's any in the Boston area. So would love to hear about that.
Absolutely. So we all of our schools that we partner with sign MOUs and data sharing agreements with us. That's the only way that we're able to access academic and attendance data. We reach out to schools with this, and with the opportunity, with the documentation, and they choose whether or not to be a part of it. Currently, we don't have any schools in the Boston area who are working with us, but we are very, very interested in expansion. We just started some expansion work in the Washington, D.C. area. So if y'all know anyone or any schools that would be interested in doing this program, please connect us. Let me know. I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Talia. I do. I have a strong, warm suggestion for you.
Awesome. And I'm actually from the Boston area, so this would be great. I'd love to bring it home.
I mean, I'm happy to mention it's Bridge Boston Charter School
Amazing. Yes. Yes.
uh, here, and so I'll make the connection
Beautiful. Thank you, Bill.
with the executive director. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If we want, we can do one more question for Talia. And if not, again, you'll have time after all of the speakers. So no pressure. Okay. I'm not seeing anything. Oh, Judy, please.
Hi, Talia. Maybe you said this. How do you choose? Do all the students participate, or just how do you choose which ones participate?
Yes. Great question, Judy. And this is probably the part of the program that hurts my heart the most. It's a lottery-based program. And so we have students apply and then they get selected during the RCT phase, either for the treatment group or the control group. I am very, very hopeful that we will be able to move beyond RCTs now that we know there's a positive impact. I think there's even like ethical considerations to denying someone an intervention that has positive, impacts on their lives. But yes, lottery based at this moment in time.
Hey, wonderful. I would love to invite John to go ahead and share your slides with us, and let's hear what's happening down in Louisville.
Great, thanks so much. I'll put up my slide here. There we go. So I am John Nevitt. I'm the Senior Manager of Economic Mobility at Metro United Way in Louisville, Kentucky. Can you all see my screen okay?
We can see it. Yeah, if you have a way to
Okay.
do
Yeah, let's see if we can
perfect.
make that larger. Gosh, after 5 years of COVID, you would think I would remember how to do this stuff, right? There we
Yeah, I
go.
think it's the slideshow one. Yep. Perfect.
So- Okay. How's that? Is that better? Okay.
You can see the next slide, but yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, so it sounds like Talia, we were also part of a research project. So just real quickly, the background, the way this came about, our former executive director who used to work in local government was very close with our former mayor, and they used to spend time together just chatting about common needs, opportunities, challenges for our community, and in conversations about, strength-based approaches to philanthropy, trust-based approaches as well. She found out that our mayor was involved with the organization Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and in fact that Louisville had just received a grant to run a pilot program. So our mayor asked if we would consider being the project manager for a pilot, and we said yes. And so we pulled in other individuals from the city and other organizations who had already expressed interest in guaranteed income and designed and operated a pilot. And as you can see from this, it operated, it was over a year period. It began in April of 2022, completed March of 2023. We chose, the numbers kind of interesting, 151 participants. It was supposed to be 150, and we made a mistake, so we added one other person. But these were 18 to 20-year-old adults from three um, low income, under-resourced neighborhoods within Louisville. Uh, Russell, Smoketown, and California were the names of those neighborhoods, and they were provided $500 a month over a 12-month period, so a total of $6,000 to participate. And just in terms of demographics, the average age of the participants was 21 years old. Two-thirds of them were female. Race, 91% African American. Annual household income, we definitely hit our target of families and individuals who are struggling financially. Mean income was 22,000, but median was only $8,500 per household. So we're hitting low income young adults. And as you can imagine, theory of change, we really built this based on what former research had said. And one of our real interests in participating in this pilot and helping coordinate it is that we were seeing the promising results across the country, and we wanted to contribute to that body of knowledge. So obviously, if you're receiving cash unrestricted income every month on a regular basis, you should have reduced income volatility. But we were also fascinated to explore from an employment standpoint, given what other pilots had seen, that actually this allowed folks to increase and find better and full-time employment opportunities. But that was a goal that we had. We wanted to see the psychological benefits of, less stress should equate to healthier lives, less depression and anxiety. And then finally, really that determination, agency, choice, goal setting, healthy risk-taking behaviors that we would expect to see, whether that's around education or career, just allowing people the space to really pursue their hopes, dreams, and aspirations in a meaningful way. So the results, basically, our participants in control group participated and answered a pretty extensive survey that was administered upon application to the program, the random selection of participants and control group members, and then every 6 months, so 6 months into the program, midpoint, at the end of receiving their final payment, and then 6 months post payment so that we could track changes and compare the two groups. And you'll see some statistically significant results here, that 32% were more likely to be working full time. 50% of the recipients did use income to pursue education and training. They were much less likely to have been evicted. Obviously, this is during the period of more active COVID. And 3 times less likely, or excuse me, more likely to afford a $400 expense, which is a common benchmark used around financial stability across the country. And then even though these other results weren't statistically significant, they trended positive in every direction that we hope to see. So participants reported lower stress levels than those who did not receive payments. They were able to keep current on bills. That they were able to leave situations and sometimes that were harmful, like an abusive relationship, that they had less chaos in their households. And and really important in my mind, 6 months after the pilot, their households continue to be higher than those in the control group. So we saw really positive results from this. And what I would say in terms of learning and challenges, yes, it does work. Although it's really not enough money, if you think about it, to list most households out of poverty, for example, $6,000. But we saw everything trending positive. And as you saw in that last slide, some continuation following the completion of the pilot. One of the things, though, we were also looking at, well, what challenges did it present for us? Distributing money sounds like it would be great, but there were some challenges. Obviously something we were concerned about in the front end and wanted to make sure we had some design elements in place. But could this adversely affect public benefits? We obviously did not want to do any harm. Knock on wood, we had no reported cases of anyone losing benefits. We did have and engage our local legal aid society who made attorneys available to folks during the onboarding process just to make sure they understood some of the risk. But we did not have any challenges with that, but it was a major concern of ours. We did get some feedback. So employers who weren't familiar with the research just assumed, hey, if you give anybody or young adults money, wouldn't that keep them from being in the workforce? And we have challenges finding, folks to fulfill open positions right now. I'm really pleased to say that one of those employers, once we shared research with them, they really took it to heart and later followed up with us and said, hey, we're really anxious to see the results from this. And if it's positive the way you think, let us know, and perhaps we can help sponsor a future pilot. So to me, that was really powerful. And then there were some challenges that we ran into. We used a partner called Steady, who was referred to us by MGI, who's worked with other pilot programs. Unfortunately, though, not all the accounts, the disbursements, were compatible. So the platform they used is called Plaid, but there were a number of financial institutions that we didn't know in advance that wouldn't be compatible. So that was one technical glitch that we ran into. And also, even though we encourage folks not to use like a siblings or a parent's account to have their own accounts, in some cases that happened. In at least one case that did not have a favorable result because I don't think the account where the money went was actually someone who was supportive of their sibling. So there were some challenges with that, but fairly minimal actually when you think about it. The biggest challenge, and this is why I was really excited to hear what you all are doing with this, how it's being integrated to workforce development. We would have loved to connect this with many other initiatives, opportunities. In fact, we did get some feedback from a few of the participants that said, what would have been great if this could have been coupled with financial management training, or, workforce development, or, gee, when I was really going through a rough time, just knowing what other resources were available. The reason we didn't offer any of those is we were really trying to adhere to the strict research design and that you can't provide supports and services for recipients without doing the same for the control. But because of privacy and all the other design elements, we didn't even have direct access to the control group, right? So those were specific things that we wanted to do, and we received feedback afterwards that would have been great for our participants. But just so you know, in terms of how we're using this, and a lot of folks have approached us to say, hey, what's next for you all? Well, number one, we love opportunities like this to share what we did learn, what worked well, the promise that we see, to really promote agency and really the trust-based piece of folks know what they need, and the less prescriptive we are, actually, the better it is for individuals. But we continue to have, in fact, I'm presenting to a group of young adult leaders across the state of Kentucky this weekend who's really interested in learning more about this. But we continue to advocate, share our belief and the results from this pilot that were very positive. And we think when it can be coupled with programming like you all are considering, I think that's where we really get the most bang for the buck. So we have a couple initiatives here at United Way where we are using the principles, the learning, to provide unrestricted cash assistance. So one of them is called Young Men United, which focuses on African American students starting in high school and hopefully following them through college. It's a United Way worldwide initiative that we're one of the partnering cities on, but that will provide some direct assistance that can be used in any way. It's encouraged to be used for tuition and post-secondary education, but it's completely at the discretion of those recipients. And then a brand new pilot that we are about to launch where we're building in actually a little more sizable amount, $1,000 a month for participants who are going through job skills, life skills training, mentoring, and supports over a period of 1 year to see what kind of difference we can make for those individuals. And it's really a response to community violence and who is most apt to be affected by that and how can we work once again, a focus on young adult Black males in our community, which unfortunately have the highest statistics for being engaged in violence, gun-related violent actions. So that is really the final slide I had because I wanted to be brief and really have a chance to listen and learn from you, but certainly to manage any questions, Rachel, if we have time to do that right now.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, John. That was awesome. And again, we'll open it up now for a couple minutes if anyone has any burning questions, but there will, of course, be time afterwards as well. If anyone, sorry, I can't quite see everyone. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to just unmute and ask.
Have you, this might be, it's not necessarily specific, but I'm curious if anyone has done any work in regards to like other programs they do in terms of outcomes, like direct, traditional programs that might be for either, literacy as an example or whatever, it doesn't matter. Traditional programs that might offer to help people improve their lives versus cash payments. Has anyone done any sort of on your side comparison to how the outcomes equate to other means of achieving higher self-esteem or more safety or whatever the case may be?
Well, Peter, I'll just start, and I hope someone has, but I don't know, and I would love to learn that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I imagine it's a hard thing to figure out, but thank you.
It's a good question, though. Okay, and John, if I can ask you to stop sharing your screen.
Are you still seeing my screen?
We are.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
It's very cool. Whatever you have there, it looks very good. It looks like a bunch of shipping containers.
Did that take it off?
Still seeing it.
I wanted to ask, was Peter, was your question, how does direct cash transfers compare to other interventions we might use, like literacy program or other social service or supports? Is that what you mean? I just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Yeah, in terms of outcomes.
Okay.
And it's not apples to apples, but
sure,
the idea is you're improving some area of a person's life with either one. So
right.
I'm just curious.
Okay. That'd be great. And John, I have a question directly for you. United Way, whether it's worldwide or in Louisville, has a lot of individual donors. Did you open this up to individual donors? Did you get any interest, or have you thought about expanding it to offer this opportunity to individual donors at the United Way?
Susan, that's a great question. We have not, and there's a couple of reasons behind that. To do anything at the size that we would want to do, I think it's going to require, both locally and nationally, so some public dollars. And as of right now, our city, they were sensitive to that. Some folks would probably have viewpoints about this that weren't favorable or just saw it as something crazy out of left field. So even though we had very positive results, we have a new administration in place now, and that's not something that they have been open to at this point. But what we wanted to do is, primarily contribute to the national body research that shows there really are positive results that can accrue. And then once again, and this does go back to Peter's question just now a little bit, but we could see extreme value of how this could be integrated. So what we are more likely to do is fundraise around portions of programming that could be unrestricted cash assistance versus truly like a public guaranteed income large scale program.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Rachel, I think I finally found that stop share button, right?
Yep. No, it's perfect. And it's just in time for Doctors Lippman and Lightfoot.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for having us and allowing us to share our project with you. Let me just see. Okay. Which one are you seeing? Are you seeing the presentation view or?
We're seeing both the next slide and the current slide.
Okay, let me try to do this a different way. You know, when you have two screens, it's always harder to figure out.
You're doing great.
Oh, it's probably still the same problem,
The
right?
same one,
Well,
yeah.
oops. I'm not going to waste your time trying to figure out how to. Oh wait, here I can do it. There, I knew there was a button there.
That's
All right,
perfect.
here we go. Thank you, everyone. So Sherry and I are researchers, and we're here to talk to you a little bit about a research study that was funded by the National Institutes of Health. A guaranteed income study. So one of the things that we were asked to do is to talk about what our theory of change was. So basically, our premise is that there are structural drivers that really influence the conditions of one's daily life. So the circumstances in which you are born, you grow, you live, you work, you age. And one of the ways that you can influence the conditions of life is by getting at some of these structural factors. And one of those structural factors is finances, money, economics, the resources that someone has. So that's one of the reasons why we were focusing on this particular area. And prior research has found that with adults, that a guaranteed income or cash transfer programs actually have an impact on things like anxiety and depression, people's work, whether or not they're getting health-seeking services. And so we know that that works for adults. And so we had less information about what that does for young people, as Rachel kind of started to allude to. So that's really what this research, one of the reasons why this study was funded by the NIH, is really to understand what happens for young people. And there's immediate policy implications for this kind of work. As others have said, right now, there's a Mayors for Guaranteed Income, and more recently, a Counties for Guaranteed Income. So there's over 100 pilots happening right now across the United States around guaranteed income. And so one of the things we wanted to be able to do is inform the decisions that folks are making around these kinds of programs by designing a really rigorous study and collecting data that would help people make decisions about guaranteed income. So we are focusing specifically because of this, what I was mentioning in terms of the circumstances that people live. When you look at the economics in the United States, one population that is historically been disenfranchised and under resourced is young people of color. And so our study focuses specifically on Black young people aged 18 to 24. So during that period of time when young person is making decisions about their long-term lives, this period seems to be one with this emerging adulthood where we could have a real impact on the trajectory of the young person. So the goals of our project were to try to change. We're going to be looking at a number of factors to see if this guaranteed income has changes folks' outcomes and their conditions. So we're looking at economic well-being, which will include investments in the future, like are they going to school? Are they doing more training? Are they getting involved in leadership programs? But also things like savings and debt and income and financial capability and food and housing and security. So we'll be looking at all of those things. We're also wanting to see if there's an impact on mental health, in particular depression and anxiety, because we know those are very high universally for young people in this age range. And then we're also, given the age that these young people are, we wanted to also look at their engagement in sexual and reproductive health services, as well as utilization of mental health. The other thing is, given this age range and given what we know is kind of the historical conditions for folks and this multi-generational poverty that happens, we knew that young people probably also didn't have a lot of information about how to manage money and all of those kinds of things. And so our income is guaranteed, so every young person has access to that. But we also made available a opt-in financial mentoring. So every young person has access to financial mentoring if they wanted it. So in our study, we look again, I mentioned 18 to 24, young people who were identified as Black. They could not have been in any other GI programs. They had to live in the United States for at least 3 years because we wanted to understand trajectories and impact of economic and job-seeking behavior. So we wanted folks who were clearly rooted here in the United States. And they had to live in a HUD-qualified low-income census tract in San Francisco or Oakland. We decided to do that as opposed to asking for people's income, because we know asking for income, a young person doesn't always know their family's income, and they have a lot of different conditions. And so they had to be living in an area where we knew that there were lots of low-income folks. We also included young people who were homeless or had unstable housing, and they verified that by their work. They had to get a letter from an organization that served youth experiencing homelessness. So the program itself, we gave young people $500 a month for 1 year. And we provided that money on what we called a CFR card, and I'll talk about that in a second. So what I didn't mention is that we have 300 young people in our study that we randomized to get the guaranteed income either right away when they first enrolled, or they had to wait a year and then they got the guaranteed income. We did it that way because we wanted to make sure that everyone got some funding, got the guaranteed income for, as you can imagine, it's a substantial amount of support. And if we were we wanted to be able to have a control group, so a group of young people who didn't get guaranteed income so that we can have a comparison, but we wanted to ensure that everyone got the guaranteed income in the end. So at the 1 year point, we were able to compare folks who got guaranteed income versus folks who didn't. And then we followed young people for an additional year, because that gave us the opportunity to then see what happens when you stop the guaranteed income and what's the long-term impact for young people in that regard. As I mentioned, we also provided financial mentoring for every young person, so they had access to one-on-one counseling for up to 6 sessions. They could do it virtually. It was very flexible, so they basically were assigned a financial mentor, and they could schedule those sessions whenever they wanted. And we were ensuring that the mentoring, we partnered with an organization that has done a lot of financial mentoring. And so they have a program where they're able to, the mentors provide information on things like what the relationship with money is, banking, saving strategies, credit basics that they know about, credit scores, how to build that, the myths around credit, how to avoid products that are not financial products that work against them, like title loans and pawn shops and those kinds of things, reducing debt. So it was intended to address many of the economic things that young people probably didn't have any education about, and no access to education about those things. As I mentioned, that we partnered with a group called Community Financial Resources. They were able to give young people a prepaid debit card. So every month we loaded that card with the $500. They didn't need to have a bank account. There weren't any fees to using the card and to having the card. And there's also the ability for them to take money from their card and put it into kind of a savings bucket as a way for them to begin to have that savings. So we provided that funding to them, and then they distribute it. So we didn't, at the university itself, didn't distribute those funds. So we asked young people every 3 months a bunch of questions about what's going on in their lives and how this guaranteed income has had an impact. And so some of the things that we heard, we wanted to also get a sense of, are there unintended consequences to what we're doing? When a young person signed up for the program, we did tell them, okay, you have to be thoughtful about who you tell about your guaranteed income, because we figured that they might be vulnerable, right, for other folks to take advantage of them. So we wanted to make sure they understood that. But in doing this program and learning from them, we heard from the young people, almost 30% talked about there being some kind of, there was something that happened that increased their a negative feeling attached to it, right? So you can say, oh, my parent relied on me for money. That doesn't necessarily in and of itself is a bad thing. But if your parent relied on you for money and it caused you stress, then it becomes something that can be negative. And so that's what we're counting here. So some of the things that young people told us is that there was some young people talked about that they were being asked for money because they had the guaranteed income. They were given extra responsibilities at home. We did have 2 young people report that they were physically hurt or robbed for their guaranteed income. And usually this was in a relationship situation where one person in a relationship stole the money from the person who was receiving the guaranteed income. We had some young people, 24 of the 300 talk about they had a disagreement or problem with their family partners or friends because of having the guaranteed income. And then Tim talked about other kind of negative experiences or events happening to them because of the guaranteed income. We also wanted to capture what kinds of, as I mentioned, we're looking specifically at particular outcomes, but we also wanted to capture what other kinds of potential benefits young people were talking about. And 83% of the young people reported some kind of potential benefit to it, to having the guaranteed income. Some of these are like softer kinds of outcomes that we wouldn't be able to see in our data. So young people talked about they were worried, they were less worried because of the guaranteed income. We had a number of young people talk about they had more time for themselves or their family. Young people talked about starting a new job, a program, or they were able to accomplish a goal like being able to buy a car or get a better apartment. A number of young people talked about being able to save money, and many of the young people said that their mental health was better because of the guaranteed income. So those are some of those soft kinds of outcomes. We are just finishing up our 1 year data collection and beginning to look at the outcomes of what happened at 1 year for these young people. So at that point, so comparing the young people who got the money right away versus the ones who had to wait to get the money, statistically significant findings here in the green. Young people were better able to cover that $400 expense that John mentioned before. They required less debt. So also suggesting that the financial mentoring had some additive benefits, because that's one of the things we were interested in, is that what's the impact of GI alone? And then does having the financial mentoring boost any of those outcomes? And so for acquiring less debt, that seems to be one of the things that happened. Young people talked about they were significantly less anxious, and they were significant numbers of young people were talking about reporting fewer depressive symptoms as a result of the guaranteed income. And we just wanted to include a quote so that you can hear from the young people themselves about one of the things that we did. We're also we're having some interviews with young people, qualitative interviews, where we sit down and ask, as opposed to doing a survey, we ask more about what their experience was and how things are happening. We followed these young people. We did these qualitative surveys for a small group of young people at the beginning, at 1 year, and we're doing it also at 2 years. And so one of the things that we heard in these qualitative interviews, I need to quit this job that was sending me to dangerous locations, and they weren't really respecting my time or my energy. And Beam would allow me to kind of budget around that and find a good job and career and actually evaluate that. So it was like the second chance. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Like the more I talk about it, like kind of my journey to being housed and just becoming one into adulthood and getting my autonomy slowly back. It's very, I don't know. It's like, I don't know how to say, like synchronistic or like a movie or something like that. But a lot of disastrous things will happen and then magically come in. So this young person talking about the benefit of having that GI and the financial mentoring. So just quickly also wanted to acknowledge the folks who funded it and our community partners and our research teams, and particularly the young people who shared their lives with us so that we're able to present this today. So I think I made it in my 10 minutes. So happy to answer any questions. And Sherry, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm just you did a great job presenting the project. I'm just here to answer questions.
Yes, thank you. That was wonderful. So yeah, we can open it up now for questions specifically for Dr. Lightfoot or for any of the speakers that we've heard from today.
I have a question specific to Dr. Lightfoot in terms of, and Lippman. So I have clarity on what you've concluded the first year, but you still have the year of postponed, your control group coming next. So
Yes.
I have 2 questions. In the first year, did all the participants opt for the financial mentoring?
No, so we had about of the 300, we had about almost 90% said they were interested in financial mentoring. But we had, and a lot of folks, two-thirds of the sample actually of the young people actually enrolled in the financial mentoring program. And we had about a third of young people actually attend multiple sessions of financial mentoring.
And did you see a difference in behavior or satisfaction with the program, or effect towards your metric, your rubric?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're looking at. So we're just beginning to look at the 1 year outcomes. And so the one place where financial mentoring seemed to have made a difference, and we're still analyzing the data, is that finding around whether or not they're acquiring debt. So they had less debt. But we're still looking at the outcomes for financial mentoring. Kara, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's right. I think the debt was lower for the control group, was higher for the control group than it was for the intervention group, and it was even lower for the intervention group that got the financial mentoring than it was for the intervention group that didn't get the financial mentoring. So debt was really the thing that sort of came out the most, but there was some indication that they might be helping in other spaces, but we're still, analyzing that data.
Cool. And I think it'll be very interesting to see with the second cohort if that postponed year has an effect on their experience of the program. Because, whether it's even just changed their mindset knowing they're going to be entering this program. We'll find that curious.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we
absolutely.
designed it the way we did. And we're going to look also at whether having a year of financial mentoring prior to guaranteed income gets people sort of further along in their trajectory, and whether there's sustained benefits of being in these programs a year later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're also doing that I didn't talk about because we're in the middle of collecting this data is we got some additional funding where we're providing just financial mentoring to a group of 150 young people, so that we'll be able to also look at the impact of financial mentoring by itself without any guaranteed income.
I saw that there was a question in the chat, and we are collecting data every 3 months with the participants. So every year they actually come in and talk to us in person, and then every 3 months they get a survey that we text them a link basically to complete.
I have a question really for all of the presenters. And, our focus here and your focus has been on young people. But how do you control for or capture data on whether the young people are independent or on their own or unhoused, or whether they're part of a family? Uh, in which case the benefits and the challenges would extend not just to the student or the recipient, but the family as a whole. Did you kind of control for that or not?
I can go first. So for our study, we ask all of the young people. So we ask them about their living conditions. And as I mentioned, some of our young people are experiencing homelessness. So every 3 months, we ask them about where they're living, the kind of place that they're living in, and the people that they're living with, so that we can get a sense of the impact of that in the research, in their lives and on the outcomes.
And Bill, from Louisville's perspective, we did ask some questions on the front end, but to be honest with you, that was not, to my knowledge, spliced and diced by our evaluator to look for any, correlations, positive benefits for other family members.
We, similar to what Dr. Lightfoot said, we collect qualitative data from students. We do a baseline, mid-study, and end-of-study survey, and all three of those ask who students are living with, what their family makeup is. And then we do ask students what they think their family income is, which I forget who mentioned that. So we don't know how accurate that is, but it does point to perception of money and how that maybe changes over time.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, just thinking about the role of financial literacy and financial mentoring and how important it can be. And as a reminder for those funders who participated last year, I know at the end there was a discussion about whether or not They wanted to sort of mandate any kind of financial literacy. And I know that the nonprofit they ended up choosing, I believe the Haven Project, they said, we don't need to mandate it. The people really want it. They're asking for it. And so we've heard about, the Beam Project and how that's really incorporated in as a key piece, but I'm curious to hear from John or Talia, did you guys get requests for that? And I know you were part of an RTC, so it was probably really regulated as to whether or not you could honor those requests, but just curious what your experience was with that.
Well, I'll just say that I'm a huge proponent of anything where we integrate. Um, and some former research I think that came out of Annie E. Casey talked about, if you receive workforce development, benefit access, financial counseling, you will achieve results towards financial goals. But if you bundle two or more of those, you're 3 to 4 times more likely to achieve those results. So yeah, whenever we've been approached since the pilot was over by individuals that were still interested in learning and, integrating, yes, we help make those connections, and we try to do that with every program we're involved in. But I'm so excited to hear about this work that Dr. Lightfoot and Sherry are coordinating, because I would really love to see, if we can continue to quantify what those differences are by combining programmatic elements, just as you all are thinking through this grant opportunity.
Our study design required that we didn't include any other interventions. And so really so that we could determine the impact of the direct cash transfers. I think if we think future thinking, to John's point, we know there's more impact if we can add in financial literacy coaching, access to additional resources. And so once we move out of the RCT and the research phase and implement this more as just a program, I think there's a lot of opportunity to layer on different interventions that are, directly influenced by what local communities, ecosystems, students are saying. I have ideas, but I would rather it be driven by those who are receiving the money.
Can I just add, I just wanted to add one thing, which is one of the reasons we wanted students to have, or not students, we wanted our young people to have sort of the autonomy to decide whether they wanted to get financial literacy mentoring and do that work. But also because we didn't want the guaranteed income to be taxed income, we weren't allowed to make required requests. There wasn't, it had to be really a gift. So there's also sort of those kinds of considerations to make about guaranteed income. If it is guaranteed income, really is supposed to come with no strings attached.
Got a question in for sort of all the speakers, just thinking about sort of longitudinal data collection and what things might look like a year and a half, 2 years, up to a couple years out. Would love to hear from each of the speakers on that. And then everyone else, keep in mind if you have maybe one more burning question, and then I promise the speakers we'd let them go shortly after the half hour.
Well, I'm happy just to reiterate, that we will continue to look for ways of integrating unrestricted cash assistance in all of our programming because of the results that we've seen and the growing body of research. And once again, that research around integrated financial services.
We currently have a grant into the NIH to follow the young people for an additional 2 to 3 years. So we're hoping, if we're successful with that, to be able to have those long-term outcomes.
Yeah, we're also exploring opportunities to link our participants' data with administrative data sets to look to see sort of into the future, look at different outcomes like educational attainment and whether they actually ended up going to school, because those changes you don't see necessarily within 1 year. Sometimes they have to plan for that. So they have to apply, they have to, so we want to look up to 5 years into the future. So we're hoping to get that funding to be able to do that, and also to look at changes in their credit scores and debt, again, look at debt reduction, debt over time.
We are in a very similar boat. We've put out requests for funding so that our goal is we have seniors who are currently receiving the cash transfers. We'd like to be able to engage them in research activities for the next 5 years so that we can look at college completion rates, what that first job is. In lieu of that, we've identified some mobility metrics that we are able to study in the short term, such as reading level, such as attendance, such as on-time graduation, that do have direct connections to some of these long-term economic mobility metrics. But of course, the like $1 million question is, what's the return on investment here? If we give students $2,000 at, this point in their lives, does that save us $9,000 in government benefits? That I think is what we're all trying to figure out. Of course, really, really challenging to do so.
Yes, great points that everyone brings up. Okay, so opening it up, if anyone has any last questions. If not, we will let our wonderful speakers go.
I just have one quick question, I hope. I'm wondering about, the size of disbursement. And here we have radically different payment plans, $50 versus 500. And, I'm struck by all of your presentations that money is kind of a feeling. It is related to mental health, having savings, having a little money in the bank. And it's interesting that the charter school students were great savers, but they had a feeling that they had some security there, and it probably influenced a lot of other things. Question being, obviously it's a cheap date. If you can do it for $50 a month, do we think with our population, which is sort of the so-called opportunity youth who are not in school and not working, and who are probably harder cases, would $50 a month work for that kind of population? Or is that really something that would work better in say, a more traditional charter school setting?
I think that's a great question. And just quick point of clarity, we do give $50 a week. So it's about $200 a month.
200. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we started the program, $50 was within the amount that we had fundraised, and it was kind of a catchy number to continue fundraising around. We have stuck with it in part because of what we saw when the expanded child tax credit during the early pandemic was giving an additional $250 to each family per child per month, and it immediately lifted 21 million children out of poverty. And so using, $50 a week, it's somewhere right around that amount. And so that is why we've chosen to stick with this number. It's also, Philip, to your point, right? It's not a huge amount of money. So we think there's a pathway to sustainable funding for it. Do I know what impact it would have on different populations? No, I think that's why we have to keep doing these programs, is so we could distill out which combination of variables and interventions has the most impact for kids.
Can I ask for John and Drs. Lightfoot and Lippman, was the amount that you ended up giving each month sort of based on the funding that you had available, or did you very purposely choose that amount first?
It's a great question, Rachel, and yes, right? It's what we had available, and was a common, the $500 a month was a common amount. But I will tell you, when we convened some community groups prior to ever getting involved in this project, there were larger amounts suggested, which we're trying to implement in one of our new programs to reflect community feedback of what amount would really make a difference. I mean, your question, Philip, is really interesting, though, because it plants a seed. Like children's savings account research, if you have any amount, you're more likely to go to college and complete post-secondary education, right? But I think from a practical standpoint, what we can do, especially if the duration is limited, I would certainly advocate for, if we were to do another project, a larger amount than $500 a month.
I would say that we chose $500 a month. That was what we had requested when we put in our application. And we chose that amount because that was what a lot of the other research and programs had been using. And so, and showing good results with adults. And so our young people, not all of them are living at home. So they're independent and on their own, or as I mentioned, they're homeless. So we wanted to use an amount that is what we saw was typical for adult kinds of guaranteed income programs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, I just want to thank all of our speakers again. It was really insightful and educational. I really appreciate all of your time, and I hope that the funders did as well. You guys are welcome to step off, but we'll be sure to share information in case anyone wants to get in touch. And just a big thank you once again.
Thank you.
So much.